All right, I think we are live now. Uh, Tejas, are you checking? Are we live? I think
Yeah, we
we
already are.
we are live.
Yeah.
Great. All right. So, hi everyone. I see there are a few people who are online, out of which one of them is Tejas himself, who is both at the backstage as well as in the front viewer. Welcome to Two Studio Heads Walk into a Bar. Uh, a place for small creative service businesses. It can be independent consultant or studios to discuss the thing that stumps us the most, which is the business side of things, and particularly business side of things in the Indian context. So that is the side that we want to talk about in this space. We want to have casual, open, freewheeling conversations. Want to have different people coming into the show as well, and we have a third guest today, which is a new thing for us already. This show itself is new for us, but having a guest on the show is another new thing for us. Let me start with a quick round of introductions. I'm Souvik. I've been running a small strategic web design and dev studio called Miranj. We are based out of New Delhi and Phnom and have been around for about 10 years now. The other host to the show is Tejas. Tejas, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hello, hi. My name is Tejas. I run a small design studio called Three Sided Coin. We do both product design, web design, whatever catches our fancy, and we can. And we are based out of we have a distributed team in India. I live in Ahmedabad, but the rest of the team is distributed and often moving.
Right, and today we have a old friend with us, and thanks a
Now,
lot, Nav, for joining us. Nav, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, guys. Yeah, so my name is Navjot. I live in Singapore and I've been here for the last 10 years or so. And most part of that, I was running a studio here called Book, and we were, again, a mobile and web dev and design shop. And we then grew up to Vietnam as well. And then the last couple of years, I was also part of another consultancy studio. Had a senior role at a different studio, so got to see studio life from a slightly different angle as well. And these days, I head design at agri-tech company called Jiva. But yeah, this is great. This is great because Souvik and I have actually done business together as well.
Yeah.
I've been Souvik's client as well. And Tejas and I've been like talking now for like, I don't know, a year or so, like quite
yeah,
regularly, on and
yeah,
off,
yeah.
just about like consultancy life and design life. So quite excited to be here.
Right. I just wanted to ask this quick question. Could you also tell us what was the size of Book at the beginning and at the end of your journey with Book, and what was the size of agency as well? Because usually we are talking about small studios here, but it will be good to
Yeah.
know what size of agencies you have been working with.
Yes, fair enough. So when I joined Book, we were five people.
Hmm.
And when I left, we were about 30, sorry, no, 27, 28 people, which
Yeah.
is like about 15, 16 in Singapore and about 10 in Vietnam.
Okay.
And then agency, when me joining made agency five people.
Hmm.
And I think right now agency is about 13, 14, which is when I left
Yeah,
after like
perfect
about a year
candidate
and a half with
to
them.
invite Nav for many future conversations, right, Tejas?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
But
exactly in the range that we are talking about. Okay, so our topic for today, submitted by a friend of ours, using a Google form. By the way, for those of you who are watching, there's a Google form link on the YouTube channel which you can use to submit a topic to us. It gives us ideas around what are the challenges you're facing, what are the topics we can take up in our future conversations. This time, we are taking up a topic that a friend of ours had submitted after our last show, and it is how do you choose projects, and that's a big question. And before we dive straight into the big question, I want to open the space by taking a step back and ask a simple thing: why is this question even relevant? What's wrong with diving straight into whatever comes your way? Just take whatever you're getting. Why even bother choosing a project? So either of you, Tejas, Nav, whoever wants to just take a stab at this.
now, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, running a business is complicated work, right? And um, you inevitably, like, there's parts of business or there's times in your business journey where things will just keep moving. They just keep moving. Things are just rolling, and you're like, fine, 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 fine. But there will inevitably come a time where you go, well, what do I want to do? Do I want to keep this a 5-person studio, or do we are the aspirations changing to a, do we want to scale up? It could be because you want to do different types of projects that you can't as a 5-person studio, or it could be because you're looking for growth as financially, or many reasons, right? So when you come to that stage of going, okay, well, what do we want to do? That almost always is followed by, okay, well, then if you're defining what we're going to be, the work that we do is going to be the main way that we're going to actually define that. Like we can say, I want to be a 15 people studio, but saying that doesn't make any difference till I decide how am I going to get there? What kind of work do I want to do? Or if I say I'm going to be a 5-person studio focusing on typography, again, it always boils down to what kind of work I want to do there. That's one. That's I guess the main thing that comes to mind. Like I have like really really long-winded thoughts as well, which probably we'll cover during the course of the chat.
Yeah. Tejas, how about you? What are your thoughts?
So whoever is ready to hire us, and we will. No, but on a serious note, uh, when a studio starts, they may not always have, and it depends a lot on the background of the studio owners, and if they already have that network and already have those channels established, then they probably have the more agency in saying, in picking up or selecting their projects. If you are brand new to the thing, you might just start with anything that aligns with your skill sets, and you are not really thinking a lot about skill sets budget. And beyond that, you are not probably not thinking a lot about uh, any other type of alignments. You might have a broader set of values or things that you want to or don't want to do, especially don't want to do. But beyond that, it could be just be like, okay, whatever's coming in, we'll just take that up. Uh, Probably later, like Nav said, he captured it very well. When you're going through that phase of introspection, you also evolve as a human and as a person. That other questions, you start to ask those other questions that may or may not help you select clients.
Yeah, and I think my journey has been that at the beginning, when you're starting out your own business, the thoughts you have in your mind, right? Autonomy. I'll do only things that will excite me, and this and that. It soon turns out to be this mirage, right? You really don't have that much choice, and you don't have all exciting work coming your way. So you probably start with, okay, let me take a few projects that will pay the bills, and you're doing the things that are paying the bill. And
Yeah.
I think that stage comes when bills are getting paid, and that's when this question becomes so relevant, because then you go back to your original motivation. Why did we start our own
Yeah.
business? We could have gotten our bills paid at a job as well, in a way. And I think, as Nav rightly pointed out, I was just taking down a few notes, but I think choice of projects can determine revenue, profitability, your satisfaction, happiness, pride, at the opposite end can also lead to a burnout, kind of a strained relationships, and other things as well. So I guess that is a very important topic to address. But I think in some other conversation, Tejas, we should definitely address the topic of having that agency of choosing, right? Like, because not everyone has the agency to choose always.
Yeah.
Should take it up before. So let's take on the next thing as well on our list, which is
Let
what
me,
should
can
be
I,
the.
can I,
Yeah, please add.
yeah, I just want to add, because this conversation just made me think of something that I think we've all in some ways missed. Um, I remember like when we were from 5 to 10 at Book, when I was kind of, I was an employee at Book first, and then I took over the studio. So, and that was when we moved from like 5 to 10. That felt very organic growth, right? It was like, okay, work's coming in, great work's coming in, or we're happy. Um, and at that point, when we were going to that transition, we were thinking just how you were explaining, which is like, am I satisfied? Is this something I want to do? Am I feeling motivated? But there was another switch that happened around that time, which it became less about us. And so I say us, which is the two founders of Book, and then me, because I was transitioning and taking over. It became less about us and more about the people who were working. It was like, Well, hold on. It was about I joined, I signed up for this because I was like, I want the autonomy. I want to have be doing the kind of work I want to do. But adding 10 people, actually, probably before that, it became, wait, what's the kind of work that we want to do as a team? Because it's not just about me anymore,
Right.
right? I am now there to provide that autonomy and that, satisfaction to the team, to the people who work there. So there is that important thing as well that, and that, kind of defined our framework of how we were thinking of what kind of clients we want to work with. So that was quite important as well. It became about the team.
You touched the nerve right there. I was going to take up that point at a later point in the conversation, but yes, I think I'm facing something like that even as a 5-person team right now, where because when you start growing the team, you also want people who have a certain motivation, who have that slight
Same.
entrepreneurial feeling in this, and you're not looking to get people who will just take instructions and do the job. You kind of look for motivation and inspiration within the team as well. So now when you have a set of people who have these ideas, then there is obviously a thing of, I want to drive and do more of this. I want to drive and do more of this, and that becomes such an important point in choosing future projects in a way. So I'll move on to the next thing that is there, because this is one of the points in my books at least, which is, what are the selection criteria for choosing point? And this question, I'm going to just say that if you can just walk through what has your journey been. Obviously the initial days it might be whoever pays us, but how has this changed and evolved, and what it stands today? At what stage are you today? Are you in a stage of, I'm very clear about what I'm going to take and what I'm not going to take? Or are you in a state of confusion, which is what I am in, right? By the way, when I just add that, I'll add by confusion there. But so Tejas, why don't you take this one, and then Nav can probably.
Yeah, so I think for us it evolves very quickly. But if I compare myself to few years back, uh, we had some, like, there are only a few things: budget, time frames. Do we have the bandwidth and availability? Uh, do we have? Is this something that looks interesting at an industry level or at a domain level? So as three-sided coin, we have always maintained a wish list sort of thing of what is the kind of things we want to work on for over the next year or 2 years. So if it aligned within that, if it fit within that, if there were budgets and everything else. And the only other strict rule that we followed was that we didn't want to take up any overly political or even stealth political things. And we did have a lot of inquiries like that we had to turn down. Beyond that, we did not have a lot of like, we are like, okay, the space itself was evolving, and at least in India, so we were just floating along with that. But after starting to grow the team, we have kind of made that wish list also uh, more democratic within the team. Like, everyone else can contribute to it. Everyone at the beginning of the year would start writing down what are the things that excite them and things that they want to work on, and how then we can factor those things in. At the company level also, broadly, we now think about what are the things that we want to, what are the skill sets and what are the things we want to include in our work. And at the industry level, and this is something that realization changes often very quickly, is now we think a little bit more about also the domains that we want to work on. Even if something is really hot out there, is that something, or are the practices within that industry something that aligns with us or not?
Mm-hmm.
So those are the things we think about, and we run every inquiry that comes in. Even if it's an email, we run everything by the team. We have a shared business channel which everyone in the team is part of. We share those details internally with them, just to get an idea, a sense of everyone's interest in working on. So, because at times, especially in the product and startup arena, there is also often a herd mentality. So you might just end up working on same type of projects, same type of engagements over and over again. Once you have done it, more of the same starts to come to you. You always have to decide, depending on a lot of factors, which ones you want to pick, or you want to not pick something at a certain point and just wait it out. Like, you have just finished so and so things. Do you want to do more of that, or do you want to take a break from that thing and do something else? So those things, that's how we internally we try to balance this, handle this. So after all the other qualifications are met, like budgets, etc., even on at the project level and at the engagement level, we try to involve everyone else in the team to see where our interests lie.
How do you decide? Uh, I guess like there's two levels at which we kind of make these decisions, right? One is on a project level, and all the things that you said.
Right.
There's another level that we always talk about. I've spoken about that like in general, like spoken to friends and colleagues and peers about that. But I don't think everyone actually makes decisions on that level, which is like the direction level. Like that's the direction we want to go to. That's a hard one sometimes, right? Like saying I'm going to go into this vertical or I'm going to do these kind of projects.
Yeah.
I feel like that was always a very difficult decision. We would toy around in some places. Sometimes it felt easy, but always because we saw the market going that way. We could see the pattern in the market. We're like, that'll be an easy way to go. But sometimes it's very hard. Like, again, it's like that's kind of deciding what's the kind of business you want to be. Like,
Right.
how do you decide on that level?
I
Like,
think
at a business level, direction.
I think Souvik, this is a great question for you because you as a Miranj have picked up that very strongly
Yeah.
at a very high level, that this is the kind of work that you want to do. And
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah, maybe I can step in over here to answer this question, and I'll also try to answer the question that I had originally asked, which is how has our journey been? And this is one thing that we have more clarity on, but we don't have much clarity on the other levels. So let me just start with our journey. Like, initially, obviously, we took whatever we got, whatever converted. That's very early days. For probably whatever money we got as well, we were today. If we reflect back, we'll say, "Oh shit, we really undersold ourselves." But that's okay. Then we got this model that we had blogged about called the sweet spot, which would say that what do we do well, what we want to do, what can we paid to do. We want to be in the sweet spot of that. Something that we are good at, we want to do more of, and we can be paid to do that as well. And from there, we kind of derived this bit kind of a thing. And this is all happening when we were just two founders, okay, just two of us in the team. And I think communication happens much better when there are fewer people, just two people discussing and aligning on ideas and thoughts and philosophies. So we created this 3-bit system. So it will be bit one is will there be pride associated with doing this work? Bit 2, will there be learning? Bit 3, are we earning adequate money? So we'll keep saying it's a 101 project or 110 project or a 011 project and things like that. What is it? And we want to take something that is 111, but we won't always get that. So we recognize that we won't get all 3 at any point of time. So our goal was to at least have 2 checks out of these 3 things. So it kind of worked for some time until we started growing beyond 2 people in a way, because this is where that confusion thing had started coming for. But before we grew to 3 people, we had got this clarity in the direction bit, which is what Nav you just asked, which is that when we were about 6 or 7 years into the business, we kind of reflected back on everything we've done, and we realized that most things that we do in the startup space, the product space, the UI, UX, and all those things, we've done all of it, like during the early days at least, did not even last for like 6 months. And then it's like, why are we doing this, something that doesn't even last? And then we reflected on all the projects that we had done as websites that would be information based, publishing oriented, or will have a content. People set it up and they used it for 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. And then the average case was that a website will be revamped every couple of years for people. And we were like, hey, we are doing much better than that. Partly could be because clients did not have that much budget to keep changing it. That could be the reason as well. But there were also definite things that the system was working great for 5 years or 6 years. And they were just happy using it. And that kind of gave us a sense of purpose in a way that, hey, we really want to focus on longevity of our work. We don't want to do something that is going to be taken by the clients, and the clients have their own team. They'll tear it down. They'll change into something else. The direction will be lost, and we won't even be able to showcase it later to future clients saying that, hey, I had done this work, but it's down now. So, but here are some photographs of what we had done, and things like that. So we did not want to go in that direction. We want people to go and visit the websites that we have made. So even till date, it's a different thing that our site has not been updated for about 10 years in terms of design and all. We've been updating the projects. We have not updated the project list for about 1.5 years now. It is on my list next week. I have to add projects to our website.
It's like every time I see a studio updating their website, I'm like, okay, that list, but that to-do must have existed for at least 5 years before you got to this point.
yeah. So when we look at in our own website, we have no screenshots of our projects. We have just a small commentary and a link to our projects, and this is what we kind of believe, like in the third year and the third year, that this is how it should be. You shouldn't have to see screenshots. You should be experiencing the project. And very soon, these links would start expiring because people have either changed, or you go to that that site and it's something else, and then, hey, this is not sustainable. So from that point, we got this direction. And I think this is great to have this larger direction in place, that we want to do sites that will have a long-term life, publishing oriented, CMS based, can be a news media site. We're working with universities, nonprofits and all. That direction we've got. But where I have reached a confusion of late is that once we have grown beyond 2 people, then there are more opinion. And this is one question I had for you as well, Tejas. How do you manage things democratically? Because it's very hard. Like if the entire team is going to say that I want to do this, I don't know how to manage democracy in my mind. And I'm right now doing more of the sales. And pressure on my head is to make sure that the payrolls get paid. So that is always there, that I have to make sure that everyone's getting their money and we are sustaining financially. And within that also, there are different desires that come out from the team that, hey, we want to do more design. We want to do more of this. It's not as much what industry we will want to be in. That's not the case in the team. So maybe that is only there in the founders, that this is the direction we want. But at the team level, it's more about, we don't want to do this kind of work, or sometimes it's, we don't want to work with this collaborator or this client. We don't like their taste, or we don't like this a repetition of say converting a mock-up into a code and things like that. So such requests come up, and I don't know yet how do I balance it out. I'm still figuring it out. Up until there were 2 people, it was easy. We got the overall direction set, but then I don't know. At the micro level, I think it's a little shaky. So Nav, if you have any comments, you want to ask anything, you can. But otherwise, Nav, I want to hear your journey as well.
Yeah, maybe I'll just add my journey. So it was interesting. Like Book, just a bit background, right? Because it's very relevant here. The reason the studio even existed was because these 3 guys got together in 2008, which is like Steve Jobs announced that you can now make apps for the iPhone. That was 2008, right? 2007, the first iPhone was launched. 2008, they announced now you can make apps. And these 3 guys who were developers and entrepreneur, whatever you want to call them, they got together and they said, let's make an app. Literally, that was the thing. So they made an app. It was the first app out of Singapore, and they published it. And because they were the first ones, they got press coverage. And then there was the 2-3 years of this rush, right? Everyone wanted an app. And because they were the first ones, they'd got some media coverage as well. Everyone came to them too. Can you build an app for us? They had been building their own app, so they put that on the back burner. Initially, it was like, oh yeah, we'll do some work for clients because it'll pay the bills while we build our own. And you know how it goes. And after a while, they're like, this is way more lucrative. So the business was built very organically because it just went into this direction because that's what there was demand for it. So it was like, oh, okay, we'll just go into that. And then about 5-6 years in, you reach that point where it was like, okay, well, we need to now, like, it's not going to grow just like that because suddenly there is applications were being commoditized and lots of people doing it. So you now needed to have an opinion on why are you doing, what are you good at, etc. So we were like, so that's when I came into the mix, and I was like, look, the way I see this, what I would love to experiment with is design, and we did a project together. And luckily, that project again had that mini moment of suddenly there was coverage in Singapore. and people were like, "Oh, there's a well-designed project out of Singapore," and suddenly there was this again a little rush of people wanted well-designed apps now, right? And design at that point really didn't mean anything. People just were like, "Oh, that's the new thing. We want that." So we started doing that. So we started building a design studio. It was, I think, only after like 6, 7 years of our studio life that we really had to sit down and go, okay, how do we want to grow the business now? We're at like 15 people. We have aspirations to do more work, and we had to like set ourselves, define two things for ourselves. One, what truly, like really honestly, deep down, what do we really want to do? What is it that we want to do? It could be, on the surface, I remember thinking, oh, like I just want to make stuff that is well designed, people can use it well, etc. And then there was another one of the founders who was like, well, I want stuff that helps big organizations change, different aspirations. So it was like, what do we really, really want to do? And it took us a while, and it went down to what all of us enjoyed, what was in common was when we can help people think in a different way. They're going on a path of like, this is how we're going to do things. And if that's a really difficult thing to do, to get people to go, I'm used to this. I've been practicing this muscle all my life. Now
Mm-hmm.
I should adapt. And that's very difficult. We kind of started thinking of ourselves like that, but we want to be good at helping companies, organizations, small teams, doesn't matter, and look at problems in a new way, because in the last 10 years, technology's just changed the entire landscape. That was one. And then the second thing that we had to define for ourselves was very strategic, that, okay, if we want to do that, we want to keep doing that for the next 10, 15 years because we love doing what we do. The culture that we had managed to create was really good. We were loving it. We loved the team. I love the fact that I could have, I could have people on my team who just had a kid, and for 6 months I could say, just go take care of your kid and have that. I love that I was able to enable something like that. So like, okay, now if we want to do that, then strategically we also need to figure out, that's our aspiration, to help people change. But then where is this going to make business sense? Where is this going to be viable? So we had to look at, okay, do we look at verticals? Do we look at industries? Do we look at geographies? And we started experimenting in different ways, and we experimented with verticals. That worked for a while. We started to look at different geographies. Kind of worked, kind of didn't work. So there was a lot of experimentation, and there was also that, the selling the newest thing in the market as well. And like, what are we good at? I remember when we started talking about user research in Singapore, we were one of the 3 studios here who was doing that, or in the mainstream at least doing that. And that brought in a lot of business. And then we started talking about service design and system design, and that helped grow the business as well. So there was definitely a strategic and business level. So we want to do this, but how do we make it viable? So that's how we then started going into setting direction for ourselves.
I have 2 questions, Nav, based on what you said. In the initial days, when it seems that you were at the right place at the right time and you were getting a lot of work because this is the craze thing. So when you are at that space, that means you must have had to choose between many options at that, because so many people would reach out to you that we want apps, and apps is this new thing. There are so few people doing it. At that stage, until you had that strategic clarity, what were the factors that came in? And the second question I have as a follow-up is, what kind of exercise was done to come up with this? Was it like a rebranding, a brand strategy exercise that you have had to do to come up with clarity at the direction level, or was it organic?
Yeah. So let's look at the first one, right? Like, how were we deciding back in the day? I would say definitely at that time we had the luxury of choice. We had really, really good clients coming as well. So we would have, like, I remember one point we were like talking to Amex and Visa within the same week, and literally had to go, who do we want to work with? And that was because we were like one of the 3-4 studios in Singapore doing this kind of stuff, and someone wanted to work with us. So at that point, we would just kind of have that luxury of interrogating more and more and going, what's actually exciting us? And exciting at that point, I remember sometimes it was, this is the latest feature on the mobile platform, because iPhone was still very new. We want to experiment with it. Let's do that. So we weren't really thinking long term. We were just looking short term. What was exciting as what was interesting.
The brand of these clients played a factor, like whether it's Amex, big names, go for that, big money, go for that. What was like the go-to thing?
Back then, if I have to be completely honest, in Singapore, money wasn't an issue. Like everyone was just throwing money at
Got
apps
it.
back then. We really didn't have an issue. Like we were, I think, operating at that time at like we were probably working for like 7, 8 months a year. That's it. We weren't
Got it.
working. We weren't overworked. We really were living in luxury at that time. It didn't last very long. It started changing very quick. But you're talking specifically about that time, right? When there's no
Yeah.
constraint, how are you picking? Um, there was definitely some brand names that we were like, let's work with that brand because we really want to, because that'd be good for business for sure. But we were working with a lot of just like startups as well. And it kind of like, because so I would attribute this to two of the founders of the company who had been in the industry for a long, long time, much, much more experienced than I was. And they were always like, yeah, you want to work with different brands. You want to make sure that you're building a good portfolio that way, but you want to also make sure that you're doing fun stuff. And that was a big thing. I remember one of the founders left when things changed, and he's like, I don't think we're doing fun stuff anymore. Right. So he was like, this is done for me. And he retired. It was like that point. So it was very clear direction at that time. And then we did get to a point where we were like, we need to prioritize long-term play rather than short-term fun. And
Mhm.
things started changing then. Um,
Right.
so
The
that
second question.
back,
Go on, go
yeah,
on. The
what was the
second
second?
question. The second question was, what did it take to do that, get that direction? What exercise did it? Was it like an organic thing, or you had to explicitly like hire a consultant, get a brand strategy exercise done, and then you have the clarity around that?
Well, it was two things. It was one was this intentional, like couple of different times going into what are we about? And if you remember, like when you and well, basically when Miraj took over our project of website, if you remember, we did a mini exercise like that as well. You guys were
Yep,
in Singapore
yep,
and we spent a
yep.
week trying to figure out what are we gonna do. And we did that a couple of different times. We did that with another studio here in Singapore as well called Mini Theory, who's also run by a good friend of mine. He came in and he tried to do that for us. We did basically over a period of 5 years, we tried to define that for ourselves 6, 7 times. We would
Oh wow.
rethink it. That was one. But I think the big thing was we we were able to take good risks. We went. I remember one thing that completely transformed the way we were doing things was this is like 5 years ago or 6 years ago. We were charging. We had at that time we were charging on a day rate. Like over time, we completely shifted to value based pricing. But that back then, 6, 7 years ago, we were charging a daily rate, and I think that daily rate, if I'm not wrong, was $700 or $750 a day for a mid-level person working on the project designer developer. And that was basically from 2008, that rate back then, that was an exorbitant rate and we hadn't changed that. And it was still going okay, but we started feeling the crunch and we were like, there was this feeling that we had, me and one of the founders, we kept discussing this over and over again. I was like, if we keep charging $700, which at that time had, I think, kind of, it wasn't on the top end. It was like very normal in the market right now. Like that's what you would get from 80% of the agencies. I started feeling that if we charge that much, that's the kind of work we're getting. We're not getting that exciting work because people now have started looking at us as this mid-tier thing. So literally over one weekend, we just decided, you know what? From Monday onwards, we're gonna kick up our rate, and we made it 1,750. We added $1,000, more than double. We just said, let's try. And it was amazing. It was like one of those moments where we had no problems. Clients were just signing up at that rate then. And it just changed over the next 6 months. The type of projects we started getting changed. We landed Daimler, which ended up being a partner for us for 3, 4 years. We got NEA, which is a National Environment Agency. Their rates were different, but it didn't change, and that those kind of risks really started paying off. Then we took another big risk where we said, there was this big move in the market to kind of push development to different, let's say, India or Vietnam, and we were in Singapore. And we were really kind of going like, how do we deal with this? Because rates, again, yeah, people are signing, but it is putting us in this position where people would sign, but they would want to skimp out on research. They're like, oh,
Mhm.
take research out because I only have this kind of money, right? Like that's the
Yeah,
first thing that
yeah.
goes out the window. And so we kind of went, you know what, we're going to just say no to projects that just don't want to do research. And that didn't overnight. That wasn't like the other example where overnight everything just worked. But it just put us on this journey. Within like 4 months, we had switched completely to value based pricing, because that then started pushing us to figure out like how do we add make sure that the clients see that we're not just adding this to charge money, but we truly believe in it. And so we started putting our skin in the game and going, look, we're going to only work on projects where we do research, but we are going to put a skin in the game as well. So we are going to actually have a stake in the project as well.
I'm going to get Nav into this pricing conversation once when we take it up in the future. I do remember us having these conversations when we were in Singapore and doing the project, and there was a lot of learning from those interactions with Nav back then, because you get to learn how a different studio operates from inside. I'll turn this point to Tejas. Tejas, do you think in India, let's take Indian context, if we just double or triple the money that we are charging, will we start getting better projects? What are your thoughts? You're on mute, Tejas.
I don't know better. I'm like, okay. So looking back, I don't think better is but you will definitely start getting a different kind of projects, which require a very different involvement from you, and your stake also becomes better. In personal experience, when we do this type of price hikes, it also initially it's a shock for us also, and just to live up to that mental pricing initially is very hard, because you are now thinking that, oh, am I providing the value worth this sudden increase that I've done? So you have to personally go through that if you are doing that. But yeah, I think that definitely happens.
But is it a risk that you think your studio can take, as an example? Whatever your price is right now, just double it.
Yeah,
it's a risk you'd be willing to take.
Yeah. So, like, again, going back to when we moved from three-sided coin to Uncommon, when we formed Uncommon, that was the thing that did happen. And we ended up not working with a lot of previous clients after that, because they were used to a certain price bracket. They had that kind of budgets. So we always leave some clients behind, and you hopefully gain new clients when you do something like that. Yeah. So that's been.
We haven't never
Yeah.
tried this, but we have never tried this. I am definitely very conscious. We have grown slowly. Keep climbing. Be assured that yes, we are doing it right. Next, then next, then next. But we have never done like a exponential jump so far in our lives.
Yeah. Everyone watching this, Miranja's prices are hiking from Monday.
I was gonna say, like, any client in the chat, they're like, even if you offer them the same price, they're gonna be like, I know.
Okay. There are a few questions that people have asked, and I'll just take Prateek's question first and direct it towards you, Tejas, because this is a question that struck me while you were telling your journey as well. Yeah. So on this question, so what Prateek has commented is, does morality, ideology, worldview come into the picture while picking projects? And you mentioned that you are staying away from political stuff, for instance. Can you elaborate how and why you're doing it? Also, I wanted to ask, are you staying away from the political stuff because you're based out of
Ahmedabad? No. We are not. Actually, we did work with, and we reached out to Miranj to collaborate on the same. We did work for a political party last year. So we did that. The earlier specific inquiries we were getting was not really aligned with our worldview, and secondly, they were stealth political projects. So they were political projects to further certain brands, but the goal, the surface goal was to do something else. And I could even name some names. So, or rather, like,
please do.
So this one of the earlier inquiries came to us, and this was like 4 or 5 years ago, or even more. Like, I think 2014, 7 years ago now. It came from this person who helps political parties win elections.
Okay.
So he ran a group, and it came from him for the current regime to build something for them.
Damn, you did. Did you not take that one? I think we all know who we are talking about here.
Yeah. So we turned it down at that point, and then very recently also, like only 15 days ago, we turned down another similar inquiries where we didn't feel like it was aligned with our worldviews. But the bigger problem here was also that these were stealth projects. So they were on the surface you were doing something, but you knew that the underlying motives were different. Versus actually designing website for a political party, which you may not align with completely, but you at least know what you're building, right? You know that this is what you're building and not something else. So that's how we handled it. But on the other, like there are other ideas. We do evaluate or kind of revisit this often. Not only political, but very recently we had to rethink about a certain domain because how marketing plays out, how their marketing and sales strategies in that certain domain play out. And we are like, do we want to, is this something that would excite us? You never know when some of these projects may just turn into a bad, no, not really a bad blood, but bad publicity because whatever else they are doing, which is not really directly in your remit. But then you are just like, okay, can I really talk about? Do I really want to talk about this? Because there's so much bad publicity around this stuff, anyways.
Yeah.
So that's how we take it. And like I said earlier, it depends a lot on your how you grow as a person, how you view things differently from one time to another, and that often impacts these decisions.
I
And
definitely
I
come to
think
the political bit.
taking those decisions democratically as a team is even harder. That's a
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's a very, very interesting place as well, right? Like I could say I don't want to work with this political party, but that may not be the opinions of the rest of the team and others. And then at that point, how do you decide? That's challenging. It
Yeah.
really,
Let's
that,
go on. Go on, Nav.
sorry.
Go on. Go on.
Yeah, it really, I was going to say that's when it really becomes challenging. Like we went through an exercise like this last year, beginning of last year, at the agency, the studio that I was working with, where I was leading the project actually, and we were trying to define this very thing: that how do we decide what kind of clients we want to work on? So we turned it into an internal project where we actually put 3 resources on in 2 months, and we said we're going to treat this as a project. We went out, did research, talked to ex clients, and trying to figure out, come up with a framework. Without going into too much detail, because that was work that was done internally, but there was one thing that we came up with, which I think is, which I still think about a lot, which was this triangle, 3 axes. One axis was business fit, which was, do we agree with this business? That's one side of that equation. And the other side is this the kind of business we want to work with right now? Which could be like, I'm only working in, let's say, aerospace. So is there a business fit at that point? Within aerospace, is this a company that I actually want to work with ethically, etc.? But we said there could be another, so the second axis of that, which could actually supersede this, which is project fit. Because we started seeing that there are certain companies that we may not agree with, for example, Facebook, right? We don't want to, like, if you ask me, do you want to work with Facebook? I'm like, no. But then there are certain projects that they might be doing that, because Facebook's so big, they may be pushing for something that we can see that may be positive impact. So we worked on a project, or I was involved in a project with Facebook, which was around building um, ethics guidelines for AI and machine learning and those things, right? So it's like, okay, well, I don't agree with Facebook, but I agree with what they're trying to do here on a project level, right? So they are trying to build ethics guidelines. How they will use these ethics guidelines, that's a different thing. But one premise was all of this research is going to be made public, completely public. So I was like, okay, I'm interested in that. So that was the second corner of the axis. And then the third corner of the triangle was ability to deliver. Like, can we actually even deliver? Like, do we have the skills? Do we have the bandwidth? All that. So we were like, any project that comes, first thing is, this is the litmus test: business fit, project desire, and project and ability to deliver. And so we're like, let's just start there. And we could have everyone in the team kind of go, what do you feel on these 3 levels? And then have a discussion about it. And then it can't be all democratic. That was the one thing. Like, we acknowledged that it can't be completely democratic, or that's not what we wanted to do. We didn't want to keep it completely democratic because we also felt like it's unfair to ask certain people to be involved equally at this level. Like, if you have a designer who's 2 years in, that may be too much of a pressure for them to even be able to go, I strongly believe. If you have opinions, great. But in the end, we say it's not going to be democratic. We want to consider everyone.
Yeah. In fact, we are going through. We just recently went through similar dilemmas internally as well, and one of the things that we are slightly lucky on is that we largely come from the same political ideology, at least our small team right now, or a similar political ideology. At some level, that's a bad thing because lack of diversity. At some level, it's a good thing. Decisions become easier. And on the flip side, when there is some organization that reaches out, which is where we don't agree with the political ideologies there, that is an interesting bit because we've recently experienced this. There were differing viewpoints, and then we have a one team member who is not even from India. So he's like, whatever you guys tell me, I'll have to accept it because I don't know shit about this. This, so it's something like that. So we had an internal short discussion around these things. The most recently, what Pratik and I were discussing is that we want to completely cut ties with organizations that we don't agree with today, because the idea is that Miranja's viewpoint might change later, that organization's viewpoints may change later. It's all in this time and space, which is what the thing is. And there might be exactly this example that Nav gave, that this, although we don't agree with the larger ideology of this organization, they do have projects that we agree with, or that's taking things in a good direction. Overall, disagree. This small project, I agree, and we might want to still do it, and we want to keep this possibility open that we get to at least have that piece which we would agree with, like the thing that Nav just said. And in our case, there were projects that we could agree with. So what we decided was like, yeah, we should not cut the ties completely, but it should be. But how do you tell this? Like, okay, when you have something like this come in, Tejas, let me take this to you, and let me also add this question that Rasak
There are
had
a few
asked.
more really interesting questions.
Yeah, few more, and I'll go to the questions right after this one, other ones.
Sure,
But
sure,
I'm
sure.
just connecting Rasagya's one. For the political projects, would you rather take it up and do something less harmful, or let someone else take it up and potentially do more harm?
Okay, so this is a slightly different answer. I found my calm as a designer when I stopped speculating what might happen outside of my own remit. Like, because this, if you extend the same things to even bigger projects that are actually consumer products which really go on to become really successful, if you start thinking in this direction, it's a slippery slope and a path to like damnation, because you are always comparing, oh my god, why didn't I take this up, someone else took it up, now they have become so famous, etc. There is a strong brand and like a whole can of worms, and you just uh, cursed yourself with a very long uh, uh, spell of damnation. So overall, it's not really. Personally, I don't feel it's very worthwhile to think about it in that terms. That okay, if I take it, I'll do less harm because it's still harm, and someone else can just take it up, because that's always going to happen. Even if you didn't turn it down for the political reasons and you did it for some other reasons, and you saw that product actually materialize, and you are like, oh my god, like I would have done a different job at it or something. So I think that's it. Yeah.
I would.
You know what?
Oh,
We actually had a comment internally that we should actually take money from them and donate it to the opposite ideology.
I would also add one more thing here, right? Like, if as a designer you think you can take a project, work on it, and do less harm, I think you're overestimating design's impact there a little bit as well, right? If you think you can work with a client and make them do less harm, you're a little over. Yeah, you're a little full of yourself there. Like,
Yeah, 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 yeah,
it
yeah.
doesn't play that way.
Yeah, I agree. Like, and this is something we had on yesterday only, like with something that the client suggested something which was equivalent of, what if I don't break your leg, but I just slap you? And no, that's not the question. You shouldn't be causing any physical harm at all. It's equivalent of that. So yeah.
Okay, let me take Nupur's first question over there, which is an interesting. Nav, why don't you take a stab of this one. So Nupur had asked, her question was, when you choose, there's always this possibility that some studios in competition might pick it up before you do. How do you balance this and not lose good projects?
Sorry, what's
So when
when you choose a project,
there's always this possibility that some studios, which is your competition, might pick it up before you. So how do you balance
so
this and not lose out on good projects? So when there's a good project on the line, you'll always fear that your competition will come and take that project, and then you'll go into probably this process of they'll have a better looking client or a better looking project than us. So maybe we should take up all the good projects as quickly as con. Maybe I assume I'm making an extension over here. Maybe I should cut the price, undercut our costs, and take this, grab this quickly, so that our competition does not get hand off this. So how do you handle this dilemma?
Oh wow!
Do you even think of competition taking up a project?
It's very difficult to run a company or do any kind of work if you're always thinking about the competition. I believe like it's super challenging if you start thinking about how you're doing and your benchmark becomes how your client's doing or what they're doing. You can't. I also believe that there's you can be in a position where you're pitching against a competitor, and I think in that scenario you double down on your foundations because you don't want to promise something that you will regret 2 months down the line for sure. Like you have to double down on your foundations. We said that's what we're going to do. They're paying us a little bit more money. We decided that money is not going to move us from this, so let's double down on that. Like it becomes really crucial, especially when you're in this competitive. If you're competitive, you have the situation where you're competing against a client. You have to double down on that. But you have to position yourself you have to pitch, and you have to see what's the best match. If you get the project, then yeah, that's great. You found a good match. But beyond that, I think it's you shouldn't let your clients define who you are. You need to define that for yourself, and you need to double down on that and just stick to that. It is really challenging. Like sometimes I agree. Like you're pitching and you know there's another competitor pitching. It's easy to get swayed by I really want to get this client this time or they'll get it. But it really never has harmed. If I really have to be honest, like it never harmed us when a competitor got a project that we really wanted. On the flip side, it was just very easy to never celebrate when we got a project that we thought a competitor really wanted. We never think of it that way. So I can understand why it's tricky, but it's you just have to ignore that. You have to go, this is what we want to do, give it our best and see. And if you don't get it, then you have to introspect and go, okay, why didn't we get it? Was this the right thing that we didn't get it? And was there any learning there? It sounds like a very wishy-washy, but you really have to dig down into your stoic self at that point. Otherwise, you're going to be leading a miserable life if you're just evaluating yourself by looking at your clients.
Tejas, do you want to add something to this? Do you think of competition?
Like I said, I found my calm when I stopped focusing a lot on outside. And this sounds a very stoic or like a philosophic thing to say, but it brings like when you stop doing that, it's much better to live, much easier to live with yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you remember that model? I don't know. I don't know if it was proposed in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People or something, that you have the circle of concern and the circle of influence, and then you want to only work within your circle of influence and not worry about your circle of concern because you don't have influence over that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I think that model generally helps, and how we think about our competition is, first, as of talking at this point of time, it just happens we are having a good time from a business point of view. There's just too much work out there. We are not able to take. We are really feeling a lack of who do we refer things to? Who do we bring up? Every person we ask is already had their hands full. So at many levels, we have never seen other agencies or other studios necessarily or strictly as a competition. Now, within the small studio space, I think we have done a lot of projects, or a lot of projects have been enabled for us because we have been collaborating so much with external, and we don't have all skills in-house. We really don't, and we need to collaborate a lot. So we have never thought of competition as something that is a threat, and it doesn't pass our mind that much. But we have definitely felt the pressure that, hey, this is a project I really want to take. And therefore you bend a little bit to just to grab that, not because competition, but because you really want them to not feel that you're too pricey, they can't work with you, or any of those reasons.
I mean, you should be like at that point, you'd be thinking like that even if there was no competition, right?
Yeah,
If you
exactly.
really want the project,
Competition is not the
and
reason.
the client's like, well, I can't afford you or your timelines, you would bend regardless if there was competition or not. Or that's how it should be.
Exactly, because you want to have that, because money is not the only thing, or there are multiple factors, and in some project you get some things, in some projects you get something. In some low paying project you might do your better work than a high paying project which is under a lot of stress and all, and the work output becomes worse, and you want a mixed bag of all these projects so that you can pick and choose for the next client or the next opportunity that's out there. So I think, yeah, I agree with what Nav you said and what Tejas you said. Competition is not in our mind when we are taking this. Let's take Rasagya's question, the first question. He had asked this long time back.
Just a thing. So in a lot of inquiries or that at the sales level, we often don't even know who the competition are. So we ultimately don't know who it went to and who we lost to for a very long time, and that ignorance is a bliss. So,
yeah, peace of mind.
Actually, an interesting anecdote there, maybe slightly unrelated, but I think very relevant to the overall conversation that we're having. There was a time when this is about maybe 4 or 5 years ago. We had a new head of sales, and we would have a lot of very smart guy. We got along really well as well, and he had this opinion because of his background. He's like, we're charging too much for some of the things. The way we're pricing ourselves is too high. And we started looking at that as a thing of concern. We're like, okay, maybe we are. Maybe that's why some of the projects were losing, because we had a new head of sales. He was, his OKRs were, I need to get, sales. So we were looking at ourselves and started looking at our competition and going, okay, well, maybe we should try and figure out how much we charge as compared to our competition. And about 2-3 months in, we pitched for this open tender in which at the end of the tender, they published all the rates. And I think it was 21 or 23 companies had pitched. And we were bang in the middle, like literally bang in the middle. So there was like this moment of, we thought we were really expensive. No, we have to pick up our prices again because we haven't paid attention to where the market is again. Like I said, like slightly unrelated, but like at that point, we were like, we could keep looking at the competition and thinking we lose out to our competition. So maybe I should be more aggressive in my pricing, whereas that wasn't the case. So we went, why are we then not getting these projects that we really wanted to? Because clearly we're not the most expensive. And then it led us on this again, like that value pricing thing.
Was there any data around who won the competition? Or who won the bid? Was it the people who charged the most or the least?
So the project, I can't remember details of the project, but the bid ranged from 15,000 to about 250,000.
Wow.
So there was a massive range. And you can tell that was because of the way the nature of the tender was structured. Some people, like, you would just go in and you would take back, oh, this is like a 3-week project. Like, it was just weird. And we kind of were like, no, this is more like a 6-month project kind of thing. So we were right back in the middle. And the company that got it was pitched at $30,000. So like the third from the bottom or something.
Yeah.
So it was a very different type of project as well. So I mean, we weren't sad about losing that project.
But I don't think we should derive out of this, make any conclusions out of this one example that clients are likely to choose at the lower end of the price bracket. I don't think that's
absolutely
case.
not.
Should not draw that conclusion.
So many examples of where the client had a budget of X, and during conversations we managed to triple that budget because the client also came. Because the client came thinking this was their problem, but we spent some time helping them redefine and really go, okay, look, we think this is the real problem. And they were like, one of them was Yamaha in Singapore, had a great relationship with them. And they came in with like X budget, and we presented this is again value-based pricing, and we were going into that. And they went for the complete end of the spectrum. They're like, no, we want to work at 3X because what we want to get out of it is that's how we get it. So like we just didn't know what the scale of the problem was. So we put a budget to it thinking this is what the problem is. So absolutely not. The clients
potential for a future conversation at this space. How do you triple a client's budget? Okay, I'll I'll quickly run through the questions that that people have asked. Rasagi had asked, could you share some actual examples or stories of projects that you picked earlier, but you won't pick it now? Tejas?
I would say we are now reconsidering, or we are looking deeply at how we work uh, on projects within a certain domain. I can probably talk about it more in person, but yeah, it's largely domains and also larger values. So the second thing we can talk about, we recently turned down a project on NFTs because my current take on that is that it's does not align well with the other thing we want to do, which is sustainability and climate. And I'm just undecided, or I don't have enough information. But the prima facie information I have is that it's not really helping the cause of
Yeah.
climate change. So we turned down an inquiry that focused in that, like budget and everything was okay, like they were okay with it, but we didn't pursue that any further. We turned it down. The other thing, the other larger domain is a like a really hot cake domain in India right now, but we are just not sure about. We have worked within that domain before, but we are not sure if we want to take up anything very soon again in it. We want to just take a step back and look at a little more deeply.
Okay, so I'll just add again. So Rasagi's question was slightly different. Any examples or stories of projects that you picked earlier? All right, so you have been doing that, but now you don't do it anymore. So
Yeah,
anything
yeah.
on those lines?
Yeah, so that's the domain. That's the domain. Like
That's
I
the
said,
domain. That's
yeah,
the.
yeah, yeah.
So you're
So
just saying there's a domain.
we have done
Okay.
decent amount of work in that domain so far, but the way it has exploded and the competition has become so fierce that we don't agree. We don't agree at all with some of the practices that happen within that domain now. So we are
Got it.
now kind of taking a step back and rethinking how much more work we want to do in that. If new inquiries come in, two things. One is fatigue, working so much into that domain so far, and second is like not clear alignment on values within how
Got it.
things are operating
Nav,
there.
would you like to take that question? Anything that you used to take up earlier and you wouldn't want to take up anymore?
There's two examples come to mind. I won't name the clients because for both the studios, those are current clients as well and working in different ways. But one project that we took 6-7 years ago. This is when I was at Duke, and we were, I think, 8. It was one of the most ambitious projects that we've taken, by far one of the, even in terms of value, financial value, the highest. We took that project, and we basically knew that it would transform the studio because it was just worth so much. The project itself was something that we had been kind of building up towards over 2-3 years. So we really wanted to do this project. In fact, we in a lot of ways helped define that project. It was a government project. We pushed in many different ways. We were like building our own projects to show the government that, hey, this is how you can change this. So it was definitely something we really wanted to do. But when we started the project, we were 8, and we had to double our studio size, or we were at almost like 21 people within 6 months to deliver on that project. So it was a project we really wanted to work on. We had been working to make this project a reality for almost 3 years. We got that project, super excited about it, but we completely overestimated. In that excitement, we completely overestimated how much we could deliver. And it almost ruined our entire culture because we had to scale up so quickly. There were so many people joining the team. Our timelines were crazy timelines that we had to deliver on. We completely lost track of some of those foundations that we had for ourselves, that we wanted to maintain a culture that we wanted, etc. And yeah, we ended up working with the client again. But we worked really hard. It took us a year and a half to define the second project with the client because we wanted to change the terms a lot. And luckily, we had a lot of trust from the client side. It took a long time, but we wouldn't that was one big learning, that let's not change the studio for a project. Let's not change who we are for a project, which was, going back into that. You really have to double down on your principles, especially in those kind of situations. That was one. The other one, I've seen that happen with us, at Book and at agency as well, a couple of times. Whenever we overestimate what we can make, or how much we can help the client. So, an example of this was we were working with a utilities company in Singapore, one of the main utilities companies. Anyone who's in Singapore will probably start figuring out who this is. I won't take names,
Yeah.
but But the project came from the wrong part of the organization to transform a different part of the organization. That's usually a symptom of it's a political move someone's making internally, etc., etc. And we thought with our research, we could show them that, yeah, how big this problem is and how much they would want to transform. We did all the work. Everything was spot on. The moment we actually proved to them that they needed to change the organization, there was literally no way around it. The project was shut down because that was not the outcome the person who was pushing for the project was looking for. And that's happened a couple of times where we felt that we could help the client see beyond where they are, and we kind of can sense that there is going to be a challenge, and we ignore it.
Got it. In my case, I just mentioned one thing. I just mentioned that we, at this point of time, we have taken up UI UX for web apps before. We are not taking that anymore. We completely say no. We just direct it to Tejas or someone else we admire, and we just say that please talk to these people. They are better than us, and we do this kind of work. So I think that has helped to have that clarity that we want to be working on those on these terms. Other than that, one of the things and the lessons along the same lines, to answer along the same lines as Nav, one of the lessons we have learned is that if we take a lot of projects from collaborators, and sometimes if we are the core experts in doing things, so if a collaborator is coming saying that, hey, I am doing 20% of the work and you have to take care of 80% of the work because we are the core experts, but it just happened that lead has come through the collaborator, then we should be at the table for the scoping of the work and everything else. We have definitely burned fingers wherein a collaborator comes to us saying that, hey, this is an exciting project and we are also excited and I've done all the scoping and Miranj has to do 80% of the work. And when we get into the work, we realize, shit, that was massively underscoped. Because we are the experts in that and the collaborator wasn't. So this is a change that we are going to do in the process that, hey, this is not, we have burned our finger in this way, I guess. I'll take two more questions from the audience that had come in. Nupur had asked, do you have a dream or ideal project that when you compare other projects against, what attributes would you consider for evaluation of new clients? So let's keep the answers short so that we can close in about 5-7 minutes. So yeah, Tejas, any dream ideal projects and what attributes do you consider for evaluation of new clients?
We do have some we have some things that we even list on our website, that kind of stuff we'll do and will not do for any clients. The ideal client would be where we are able to explain, we are able to like handle the disagreements and everything through a discussion and like strong logical arguments. And this is easier said than done, lot easier said than done, because it will always get into a place where your clients are just giving you design solutions, where you are the mouse in their hands executing those in a design software of your choice. So what we try to do, and very clearly, is that we want to get involved at a very early stage and be able to define the project with you. Like you said, we want to do that scoping, we want to do all of those things, and we have had a couple of those projects in the past. Unfortunately, one of such project didn't go live also. It was a product that didn't really make it, but the experience kind of stayed, and we would like to replicate that a lot, which is like a proper 3 weeks of scoping, discussing, negotiating, and coming up with a larger product idea. And then on regular basis, the execution goes through another round of discussions, regular discussions, and it gave all of us enough space. There was enough budget. It gave everyone working on the project enough space to kind of experiment and still do the work they needed. So it has happened recently over the last couple of years. It has happened on multiple projects, and now I think we discover a lot of surprisingly good things about the team members also. When you give them this kind of perfect sort of an environment, they could surprise you in many ways. So yeah, we do have.
I love that. Yeah. Love that. Yeah. Amazing.
Nav, anything from your end? Dream ideal projects, and what attributes would you consider for evaluation of new clients?
I think if I have to be very objective about it, like every client, I guess we would evaluate on this axis of resources versus ownership of the problem, right? So resources is time, money, etc., right? And at different times in your studio life, you will have different buffers to it, right? So there were definitely points in our studio life we were like, we can uh, 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 accommodate clients on the resources, even if we have to go a little lower. We're fine with it because we felt that the client had really strong ownership of the real problem, that they really wanted to create this change. So resources, ignore that, but like it's in your hands. You decide that. Ownership becomes that objective thing for me. That how much do I feel the client actually has ownership? Because I have a feeling, or I have this belief that if you have a client who has very little ownership of the problem that you believe actually exists and they're trying to solve it, that's a lot of hard work to move them into that, in that matrix, to that part where they start taking ownership. So I would always look for a client who has a certain level of ownership on, yes, we want to do that, so that they will be a partner with you, because you're going to, as designers, ask hard questions. And if they don't have the ownership, you'll scare them and they'll just run away. So that's objective. If I have to be very objective about it, that's how I would go. Like it's the ownership.
Mhm.
You as a designer evaluate whatever the problem is, and then you evaluate them, that how much do you feel, how much do you think they'll go to actually solve the real problem there.
Got
But
that. And yeah, yeah, Tejas.
sorry, but I would actually like to ask this question back to everyone who's watching this. How do you have a dream or ideal project, and how do you define the attributes? Like maybe on a Twitter thread or something. I'll just ask that, and
Yeah,
everyone.
or probably put it on the live chat as well,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
that
yeah,
we also
yeah,
know
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
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 so the
yeah.
dream and
Absolutely.
ideal project from our side, we have always held that we want to do projects which is used by a large number of people. Like if we could do the Indian Railways website, as an example,
yeah,
has a massive impact. We'd be willing to just work at cost to be working on that, but really we don't have enough resources to work through the bureaucracy to be able to capture that. That's a different thing altogether. So those are the things in the dream and ideal. But in the evaluating a client, I agree with all the points that were made. But one thing that I would add is, uh, one, if a client gives you more time, that's a great thing. If they can afford to, that's always going to, like, we prefer slow projects rather than fast projects. The other is, if a client, most clients come to you with a solution in mind. They just say that I want this built. This is what I need. Very few clients come to the table saying that, hey, I'm facing this problem and I'm looking at your expertise to help me solve it. So they are completely approaching it from problem side. If you find someone who's approaching from problem side, we just drop other projects and we say, we want this, we want to
yeah,
work in this project. I think that is one factor that I can add to the client
yeah,
evaluation a bit.
yeah. No,
uh,
absolutely, I agree.
yeah, and last question we'll take from the audience right now, which is a question from Vikalp, who had asked on Twitter. How do you maintain a long relationship with folks on client side if you are unable to choose the project for some reason, like scheduling conflict? Hmm. Tejas, Nav, anyone? How do you maintain a long relationship with folks on client side if you are unable to choose the project for some reason, like scheduling conflict? So you have not been able to take the
Yeah.
project, but how do you build a personal relationship or a relationship with them, still keep that relationship? Any hints or any suggestions around that?
I'll maybe answer that with an example, or like a client in Singapore. We spoke to them. I think like we ended up working with this client, but the first time we spoke to them was about 2.5 years before we actually ended up working with them. And the reason that we got the second project, when we got the second project, basically they didn't even go to anyone else. They basically came to us and said, "We want to work with you guys." And I think it was because of the way we had interacted with them in the first interaction. They really appreciated the way we went in. We were really trying to poke at the problem and really go what the problem is. Um, so it made them remember us.
Mm-hmm.
I've never been great at keeping in touch with clients. One of the founders of my company, he's a people's person, he's a salesperson, he loves this stuff, but he had taken a step back, and I struggle to keep in touch with people and do that. So I'd just be genuine in the interactions that I have, and then but that's me. That's the best answer I have.
Yeah.
So I don't have a great answer, but that's what, like, yeah, you just be genuine in the
Te-
interactions, and then people might remember you, or people will most of the time.
Tejas, are you good at keeping relationships even if you're not working on a project?
No, I'm terrible at keeping in touch that way.
This is the
And
great thing about our show. We are like completely honest. We are terrible at this.
no. I totally. I've seen people who are really good at it. I've tried to learn from them. I've tried to emulate them also. Uh, it has not always been very successful over a long period of time. You just lose touch at
Yeah,
certain points. Uh, the best way to also, if you are turning something down, the best way to do that is to point them to someone so they might remember you because you helped them. And
Yeah.
then but that's it. Beyond that, if I then find something interesting and that person is in my on my Twitter or LinkedIn or something, I just share that across to them, and that's
yeah,
one way of. But it's more not really to keep in touch, but just a genuine connection that you may have made. It may not happen with each and every client. Right? So yeah, I would say at large, I'm terrible at it.
So one of the complaints my partner has against me is that I spent hours talking to a client whose project I will not take, and I just say that you don't need us, or you go point them to a direction where they can probably go and work with someone else, or they just redefine the problem for them and leave it at that. Uh, so that's something I do, but I don't think I believe that puts me at a place where they will remember me, or they'll remember us, they'll remember interacting with us. But I'm not sure if I can maintain a relationship or keep checking on them and all those. Haven't had the bandwidth,
yeah.
or I don't know how to do that. But yeah, I think
You know,
that's this.
this question actually is a great segue into a question that I had that maybe could be another topic for another conversation in the
Yeah.
show,
Yeah.
which I think is a big one, which is as a founder of a company, right? There's of a design studio, specifically design studio. There's always this moment where you have to decide between, am I going to be now doing business development and sales, or am I going to be the one who's growing my internal team? Like there's this,
Mhm.
like, especially when you go to scale, and I have seen right now, I've been having conversations in Singapore with studios that have reached that like 10 to 15 people. Like I had the same thing at Book. Once the studio was above 10 people, I wasn't mentoring anyone. I wasn't doing design work. I was all involved in the sales. When we
Yeah.
experimented with the other side, business suffered. And when I was doing that, the quality of work was hard. So it's like
This is
really
a big
hard.
topic, and I've taken a note of this. We are definitely going, as much as I've taken a note of that, how to triple a client budget. I'm good. I think that's also a very interesting topic to work on. So these are two topics that we've got. uh so thanks a lot everyone for asking these questions. I want to just have a closing thought around what are your, and this is just tying into, we have touched upon it in bits and pieces before. uh Ethics, how much of a role does that play in choosing project? And I want to close this thing that with this question. Tejas, I'm sure you have thought about this, you have given a lot of answers around this. What you're saying is that you've taken some actions, but how do you look at it ethically? Are there are there any framework in your mind, and what's your relationship with that being a matter other than money and time, and what big the brand name is and all of those things? Let's
Yeah.
talk about this as we close the conversation.
I think, and again, like uh, this reflects or this changes with how as a person you grow or you evolve.
Hmm.
I think it has become now a lot more important thing for us than it was before. Like I don't know if I could put a percentage value on it, or like I'm not able to put it on a Mellon's triangle or something, but it has become something very quick. Like if you saw something and you had to answer immediately, would you say yes or no kind of thing? That type of question also. Hey,
How
if
do you
this was.
manage democracy with that? Like, because everyone will come with a different barometer as well, right? Every individual in the team.
Yeah. So we try to discuss that, and often there won't be 100% answer. Like you might just feel a little bit closer to one thing than the other. and then you decide based on other parameters if you really want to take that up, if it is interesting in other directions. Like the political party thing, I don't think we really align 100% with the ideology of that political party or their actions or other things. But from everything else and the opportunities we had, we probably felt that the least harmful, or something that we felt closest with. So it wasn't 100% thing, but it was like, okay, this looks the least harmful of everything else.
Mm.
Got it. Nav, I think your frameworks did not take the ethics element as much. So I am curious about your thoughts around that and how do you manage democracy with that?
No, actually, I mean, it did, because we were looking at business fit, because is
Business
this a
fit is
business
the
we want to
point.
work with versus on a project fit? Like it could, the reason we actually split business to project was because we said sometimes you might want to work with a company which you don't agree with on an ethics basis, but because the project that they're doing might be something that we think they're trying to change themselves, etc. I think the hardest thing, I mean, if I just say yes, ethics are important, that's a non-answer, right? Like it's like, yeah, ethics are important, but
Yeah,
how do
yeah.
I? So I think one of the things that I struggle with when it comes to ethics is this bias that we have that ethics are objective. Ethics are not objective. What I believe ethically right or wrong is not going to be the same as my team member or my co-founder, etc. And I think that's acknowledging that and working with that. That's very complicated. Like um, I mean, in the last 4 years, for example, the U.S., right? Trump, Democrats and
Hmm.
Republicans. Like, does that mean like you can't have a company with two people from opposing? Like, that's what it seems like. Like, you can't have a Democrat and a Republican in a company. Like, let's say, right? But
The
I'm
social
like
media
that.
is making it like that. It almost
Yeah,
sounds like it's become such a zero or one, such a big battle. You
it,
can't.
it, it does, right? So, but ethics isn't like that's what like we say in design the biggest weapon you have is empathy, so it has to start there as well, having empathy with the people who come from the other side. Having said that, you do need to define certain things, like, and you need, like, that's where everything can't be democratic. Remember when I was saying that
Yeah.
triangle, we put that triangle because we said that, yeah, we want to evaluate ethically and morally, like, do we agree with this? And that's why I said we also decided that no, we can't have everything democratic. Maybe it's living in Singapore that's taught us democratic dictatorship, but that you can't have it because it's very challenging. It's very, very challenging. Maybe there are better ways of doing it, but that was the approach that I would go for still, is that I have to define at a certain level that this is how we're going to behave. And I have to be okay with going, I agree with it or not. Like you saw Basecamp, right? Like
Yeah.
Jason Fried, he
Yeah.
was
Yeah. He
like
just put it out. Yeah.
yeah, he was like, but he was like the torch for ethics and how I should be running company for a long time, and everyone was like, he's great, look at him. And then there was a moment where it just didn't work anymore, and
Yep.
it backfired. But I still like his approach, where you're like, look, fine, it didn't work, but that's me. That's how I
Yep.
can't be right all the time, so it's okay.
Yep.
And yeah, so that's how I feel about ethics. That yeah, you
Yeah.
kind of need to define it and just stand by it.
I have a slightly funny take on ethics. Like some things
Hmm.
are a clear no. Like I don't want to work with clients who are doing drugs, trafficking, illegal
Yeah,
activities, and things like that's very black and white. I have a personal thing for I'm quite anti-smoking from my as a personal
yeah,
thing. So I don't want to work with tobacco companies or things like that.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But uh, there was once just a few months back, if I'm not wrong, or 5 6 months back, we were contacted by an adult website,
Hmm.
and we took it as a feather on our hat that look, these guys found us out. So it's a funny
Hmm.
thing. We didn't work for them. We said no, but we still feel that wow, they found us out. Like it's not a big one of the popular ones or any of that. It's a small one, but they kind of found us out, and we are taking it, carrying it like someone from the adult industry found us out, and they sent us an inquiry, and we feel a little bit happy about
Yeah,
that for
yeah.
some reason. Is that bad to feel happy about this? Do
Well,
you ever
see,
take?
that's where you go, right? Like, I would go, what's wrong with adult industry in
Yeah.
itself?
Yeah,
I wouldn't think there's anything wrong with it.
yeah,
Again, you evaluate the business and the project and then figure out. But I think also, like, in there's another nuance question. Like, what happens if you're working on a project which you decided that this is, yes, it checks everything. While working on a project, you
yeah. You
realize
discover.
something, or the client wants to do something that's not in line with your ethical standing.
Yeah.
What do you do in that situation? Are you going to try and change the client? Are you going to walk away from the project? What's that gradient, right? That's an even harder decision to make, I think. Being
Right.
objective about it at the beginning is easy,
Yeah.
or I think it is.
How to walk away from a client. We were discussing this stat at the beginning before we started this live stream, and maybe that has to be a topic once also
Yep.
for the future.
Absolutely.
Okay, I think we have done about 1 hour 24 minutes. This is has been a long show. Thanks a lot, everyone, for all the questions. Uh, uh, Before I close completely, any closing words from either of you, Tejas or Nav? How was your experience in this conversation? How did you find this? I first
really
want to
enjoyed
start
it.
with thanking Nav a lot, because
I loved
because
it.
these frameworks are so useful, and I have experienced that talking to Nav while we were working on a project before, because they kind of give you this direction, because you always feel you're in a dark. You need a light in some ways, some frameworks of thinking. It's not a big thing, but these are tools for taking calls later.
I think it just
How
shows
did
you
this go?
how much I struggle with ambiguity.
Yeah.
I absolutely loved it. Like that's why as soon as I found out you guys were doing it, I was like, wait, me. I loved it. I love these conversations. I mean, the only thing I would add is, like, for everyone watching, just to be very clear, I'm not running a studio right now. I haven't been part of a studio for 6 months now. But it's interesting to kind of look back at all of that and kind of go, hey, this is how we did things, and this is how we were thinking about it.
Yeah, totally. Tejas, any closing words?
No, I think I enjoyed this a lot. I didn't know, like, we don't have any formal framework, so I think I'm going to start using this now. But the biggest thing I took from this is increase your rates.
Increase your rates and everything falls in place. But as a small studio, just also be in that place where your bills are getting paid before you start doing this dive straight away, because you'll never feel confident of doing that initially. And
I feel like we really need to have that conversation.
Yeah, perfect. Absolutely. And Nav is a strong believer in that. I do remember our conversations from 4 years back, I think. All right, let me close this show. Thanks a lot, everyone, for joining in. We have a Google form on the YouTube link where you are. You can suggest topics for the future. We have already taken a note of few in this conversation itself, and what we find is every time Tejas and I talk, there is a new thing to talk about. I assume these conversations will go for a long time in the coming months, probably years. I don't know. We don't have a very fixed format, and if any of you would want to join in the conversation, like how Nav did, please DM Tejas or please DM me on Twitter, and we will try to have you also in the conversation, because we would love to hear other points of views. We are clearly struggling ourselves with several questions. We have answers to few, and we don't have answer to several of them. And it will be good to have different points of view from everyone. So thanks a lot, everyone. Thanks for giving your Saturday morning. I'll just end the live stream now. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.
Ended. Okay, live stream is ended. Now we are